Awaken, Calcium boys, awaken. It's time for a deck profile.
What is up, epic gamers? I'm coming to you today with a Skull Servant deck profile. One of my favorite decks ever, if not my absolute favorite, because who doesn't like skeletons, right? So grab a glass of milk and let me show you how to do it Skull Servant style. So for the main deck, of course, we have our boss monster, which is King of the Skull Servants. Of course, you run 3. This is the guy that gets 1,000 attack points for every Skull Servant card in your graveyard. So this is our boss monster. We want to get this guy out as fast and as strong as possible. So we run 3 of this guy. So after that we run 3 Skull Servant. You need this guy, even though it's a normal monster. You don't want to draw this, you want to send this to the grave as quick as possible, and how you do that is with White Prince. We run 3 White Prince. This is the card that upon being sent to the graveyard himself sends a Skull Servant and a Lady in White directly from your deck to the graveyard. So if you use 1 for 1 and send this from your hand to the graveyard, you have an instant 3000 attack King of the Skull Servants. So this is definitely one of the best cards in the deck. And you can also banish 2 Skull Servants and discard from your graveyard, and you can special summon 1 king from your deck. So if you have a pretty loaded up graveyard, you can just grab your king directly from your deck. Up next we have White Mare, which is also a very good but a very pricey card. It's like a common that's like $10 because it's a short print in a pretty rare set. But if you can run 3, he can either discard himself to summon a remove from play king or lady and special summon it, or he can return a White Mare or a other Skull Servant that is banished to your graveyard. Then we have 3, the Lady in White. You don't really use her effect too much, but you kind of want to max out on every White and Skull Servant card there is, because you want to get your king as buff as possible. And then last up is probably one of the more questionable cards. Of course you need it to make your king big, but it's not really something that comes up quite often. If it's normal or special summoned, you can send 1 White Prince from your deck to the graveyard, which is amazing. Then you have the effect that you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and all monsters currently on the field lose attack equal to their level times 300. But with link summoning, levels really don't come up that much. Sometimes they still do, but if they ever release a new Skull Servant support card and it's really good, I'll probably cut these 3 out and replace it with the new support, because space in this deck is really tight because you're running 3 of all the White and Skull Servant cards. Then for the generic zombie support, we have 3 Unizombies. Basically just dumping cards from your hand or your deck into the grave and set up your graveyard even more. Of course, a zombie deck isn't complete without Mizuki. What can I say? I mean, Mizuki, it's a staple 3 of in almost every zombie deck, so run it. Then I have 1 Gozuki. Before I never ran this card in Skull Servants, but you can still during your main phase send 1 zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard, so it also helps setting up White Prince. And then I always call these slots in my deck free slots. At the moment I have a Ghost Belle and a Ash Blossom in this, but if you prefer 2 Ash Blossoms, run 2 Ash Blossoms. If you prefer Effect Failure or whatever, run 2 Effect Failure. But at the moment, these are the only 2 relevant hand traps I own. But free slots, if you prefer 2 Ash Blossom, run 2 Ash Blossom, etc. So for the spells, we have 1-for-1. Basically a really easy way to get out your King of the Skull Servants, especially if you have any good zombies in your hand. You can send White Prince from your hand to the graveyard to use it and get a instant 3k king. Monster Reborn, classic card, of course you need it to revive any of your fallen kings or other zombies. This is a really nice card too. Link summoning comes up quite a bit in this deck. Like if you're summoning Link Karibo or Vampire Sucker by using one of your kings, you can just you don't have to worry about your king because you can just bring it back with this, and in Vampire Sucker's case you can actually get an extra draw off of it. I play 3 Called by the Grave in the main deck. Get yourself some Called by the Graves. It's a really important card in this deck. It dies to hand traps, sadly. Then 1 Card Destruction, Graveyard Setup, and refreshing your hand. Enough said. Foolish Burial. If you don't have any other ways to send your White Prince to the graveyard, use this. So Reasoning is another card that I'm trying out at the moment. You probably only use this during your first game. You kind of want to side it out afterwards because your opponent knows what levels you're running. But it's also another really good way to load up your graveyard and maybe get a special summon out of it. And then the last 2 spell cards are Burial from a Different Dimension. In my testing of this deck, it doesn't really come up that much, but it's a really nice way to get back your banished White Mares or Skull Servants, Kings, your Mizukis too. So yeah, a nice recursion of your banished monsters. And for my trap cards, I only run 2 Solemn Strikes to negate summons and monster effects. That was the main deck. Let's go on to the extra deck. So like I said earlier, you don't use the extra deck a lot, but there are a lot of opportunities where you can use your extra deck. So I really like to run some good cards in it. So first up, I run a Saryuja Skuldred, which is an amazing boss monster alongside King of the Skull Servants. I'm kind of afraid that it might get hit in the ban list next, but until then, I run 1. So next up I have Summon Sorceress. She's also a really nice way to get out your king. You can special summon a useless zombie monster or a skull servant from your hand to your opponent's side of the field and then use her effect to get out a king of the skull servants. Of course, Borreload. So then I run a Nightmare Cerberus and a Nightmare Phoenix. From my experience, these cards are some of the best ones. Alongside Vampire Sucker, I go in one of these the most to get rid of some opponent's cards that I don't like. So next up is Link Karibo. We run a lot of level 1 monsters and it's nice protection for your king. And it's also a nice way to use with World Legacy Succession. Then we run 2 Vampire Suckers, a really good zombie Link, I should say. It's also a really nice card to use with World Legacy Succession and just a really nice zombie Link monster in general. Then for the Synchros, we have Black Rose Dragon, Field Wipe, really good. Psyflame Lord Omega to get back your banished monsters like Mezuki. Next up we have Bielzi of the Diabolic Dragons, another really good level 8 Synchro. Don't really go into this much, but it's a really good card to have in this deck. Shiranui Shogun Saga. I barely ever make this, but I felt it's like a good 3000 attack Synchro monster that's really easy to make in this deck. Then for our only Xyz monster, we have Abyss Dweller to negate some graveyard effects like the Salamangrades have, and some Sky Striker decks too. I just run one of this. And then we have Predaplant, Draco Stapelia, and Salamangrade Violet Chimera. And these are just in here for one of the cards in my side deck. So that was the extra deck. Let's go on to the side deck. So my first 2 side deck cards are a couple of Ghost Ogres, which are great cards against Sky Strikers, like when they search of Shizuku, and also Thunder Dragons. I run 2 Effect Veiler. Basically, I run this because I don't have Infinite Impermanence. So I kind of use these in the side deck. If I had Infinite Impermanence, I would have swapped out the Solemn Strikes for Infinite Impermanences and put these Solemn Strikes in the side deck. But then I run 2 Dino Wrestler Prankatops. It's basically free to summon, spot removal with 2600 attack. I mean, do I need to say more? 2 Twin Twisters, which is a side deck staple. Discard 1 card, target 2 spell or trap cards on the field, destroy them. In a zombie deck, this is amazing because discarding a card barely even is a cost. Then we have Super Polymerization. So for this deck profile, I actually ordered a Super Poly and it didn't come in time. So I had to be creative. So yeah, we have Super Polymerization. You guys probably all know what it does. So I used the Super Polymerization for the Draco Stapelia and the Violet Chimera. So then we have a Solemn Warning to negate summons or activations of other cards. Then, since we're running almost all zombie types, we have Rivalry of Warlords, which is a really great card against Sky Strikers and Thunder Dragon Danger decks because they run a lot of different types, or they summon a lot of different types. And with Rivalry of Warlords, it only allows you to have 1 type on each player's side. So definitely a really good card in this deck. And then some more proxy cards. Last up, I have 2 red reboots to counter stuff like Evenly Matched or Infinite Impermanence. Another card that I ordered didn't come in time, so I had to use proxies, a Japanese one and an actual fake one. So that concludes my Skull Servant deck. I really hope you enjoyed it. I really advise this deck to beginning players. It's pretty easy to understand. It's kind of straightforward. You want to dump cards in your graveyard and get a really big king on the field. It's not really a meta deck, but it's a really fun deck, and it's a deck that I love from the bottom of my heart. And I hope I was able to convey some of that love for this deck to all of you. So I want to thank you a lot for watching. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.